Hello, everyone. Thank you for beaming me in to beautiful Costa Rica. I want to let you know a little bit about the task that I'm working on. I've been asked to redesign the English language teaching curriculum for the elementary level, ciclos 1 and 2. To do so, I've been asked to align the curriculum to international proficiency standards, the CEF, and I've also redefined objectives, goals, and outcomes in the curriculum so that teachers can more easily use the curriculum for lesson planning and assessment. I have trained national and regional advisors called asesores on the curriculum design, and they have started drafting some new units, which I am now editing, and the remaining ones then I will write to complete the entire curriculum. And then I will go back to Costa Rica and engage in teacher training on the new curriculum. The alignment is being done according to the Common European Framework, also known as the Marco Común Europeo, or the CEF or the CEFR if you're coming from Europe. Basically, what the CEF does is it helps set a standard terminology, a shared understanding of language development in terms of foreign language teaching or second language teaching. This framework helps facilitate expectations that are transferable across various settings. It can be used also for tracking student progress over time. And the CEF helps create some descriptors that are used for teaching, learning, and assessing. It also aids students themselves in monitoring their own language learning so that they become more autonomous learners, as well as giving parents a way to understand their children's learning activities and also communicate with teachers about what's going on with their language learning. The framework is clustered around what's called general competence or competences, as known in Europe, competencies, as known in the United States. There are communicative competencies and general competencies. The psychosocial and the sociocultural have to do more with the psychological predisposition for learning another language, and also the sociocultural interchange with target users of the language. The communicative competence works with knowing the language, knowing how to do things with the language, and how you're changed as a human being because you are learning a new language and learning about a new culture. What we think about normally in learning a language is basically these four: listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. But it's also, in the doing piece, is also about what you do with the language, how you express the language, and how you get your needs met in the target language, and how you interact using language in socially acceptable ways with the target language, or with the target language users. A lot of times people tend to think that because grammar is not explicit in the CEF, there is no place for using for teaching grammar in English or in the target language, and that's not true. Basically, the reason why grammar has been left out of the framework is so that the grammar and the vocabulary that's used does not become culturally biased. Instead, what folks in the CF want us to do is to personalize the vocabulary and the grammar expectations to suit the individual or the specific contexts in which a second language or a foreign language is being taught, according to time, purpose, location, and context. Often what is asked when the idea of learning another language comes up is how long it takes. And it's hard to give an easy answer to that. What that rate is influenced by is the amount of prior exposure to the target language, in this case English, has been, the quality of instruction, which is a big issue, the learner's age, the level of proficiency in first language, orally and in terms of reading and writing, and that's a major factor research studies around the world have shown. Also, the parents' levels of education and their expectations for what their children will end up doing with the language. Will they work in it? Will they travel with it? Is it basically something that looks good for applying to colleges, or is it something that's really important in terms of future earnings expectations? And also the transferability between the target language and the first language. So if you have a Chinese student learning English, there's a lot more distance between the languages versus a Spanish and English that shares, both languages share a lot of cognates, for example, that can be transferable between languages, and thereby making the rate a little bit faster. Um, the CEF and many frameworks tend to break down language proficiency levels into six of them, as you can see here, A1 through C2. Something that is important to emphasize is that as one learns another language and the proficiency level grows, at each new proficiency level, the language learning gets actually tougher. It's just like, for example, if you are climbing one of your beautiful volcanoes, Irasu. As you're getting up toward the peak, the pathway gets steeper and steeper. And that same thing happens with language learning. And so, although you might think that learning accelerates the higher up you go, it actually gets more difficult and requires even more time to go from one level to the other. So the basic proficiency levels that have been identified for first and second cycles are the A1.1 to the A2.2. So starting in first grade and going to sixth grade. And I'll leave you to read these examples of the differences between the different proficiency levels. But basically, one works with more at the word level, and the other one works more at the basic phrase and sentence level. When I was there in November, we visited several schools around the country. You can see here where we visited. Our hope was to visit 19 schools, yet 3 were closed, and in 7 of them, the teachers were absent. And so that left us with 11 visits, but of those, the lessons were interrupted for 5 unannounced lunches, and that left us only being able to observe 6 complete lessons. And that gave us an indication that although English lessons are supposed to be at minimum 3 40-minute lessons in a week, that really isn't happening as much as we would like it to. In some schools, the goal is to have 5 40-minute lessons. So you could get anywhere from a bare minimum of 3 up to 5 lessons in a week. There are usually 41 lessons in a school period. And so that led us to try to break down how long it would take for students in Costa Rica to learn English based on the number of instructional hours. The norm for learning broken down at the CEF levels, you can see in this column. And what we decided based on the number of hours being taught per week and per year is right here. So if you think of the minimum being on this column and the maximum being on this column, we're trying to sort of match that up with the norm for the CEF. And so we decided that for grade 1, we would actually make that a pre-A1 level, where the students are getting barely introduced to the language as they're getting used to also learning how to be in school and operate in just that school setting. Then we decided that for grades 2 and 3, they would be expected to work at an A1.1 level. Now, all 4 skills will be integrated in the in the curriculum, but the emphasis will be on listening and speaking. Just like a baby and a toddler learning a language, a lot of input is oral first, and then at around after the first year of exposure, a baby will come out with his first word, and then language expands from there. So knowing that that is basically the same route for language acquisition in children, we're using that as the basis for learning the second language. That doesn't mean, however, that they are not supposed to be, they should still be exposed to reading and writing, just not expected to produce in reading and writing. Then in grade 4, when reading and writing is also introduced in the Spanish curriculum, then the all four skills will be emphasized in English as well. Many of the same methods that are developed in the Spanish program should be used in the English program, such as things like read alouds, shared reading, shared writing, a lot of modeling and interaction, use of high frequency vocabulary, checking for understanding, working the reading comprehension piece, all of that that is involved in the new Spanish curriculum should also be used in the English curriculum. So those methodologies should be pretty parallel. And yet, it is at this point that we'll devote about 100 hours in fourth grade to help get the students to go from an A1.2 up to an A2.1 level in grade 5. And then you can see that in grade 6, an adequate number of hours are also scheduled so that the students by the end of grade 6 should be done with, should be able to reach the A2.2 level.